Welcome back to Onward to Victory on this Monday afternoon. My name is Colgin Hirschel. Alongside me is Rhiannon Boesl and Taylor Gautney. This is episode 18 now of OTV, and we got a couple of pressing news topics on this show today. We'll start off with one that is about to kick off or start off in 30 minutes, and that is the basketball crown tournament, inaugural crown tournament in Las Vegas that Arizona State basketball is taking part of. And we'll have Taylor Gautney start us off.
Yeah, so, excuse me, Arizona State, of course, didn't make NCAA March Madness, which is going on right now in full swing. But they didn't get invited to one of the tournaments. Of course, you have the NIT, and then a new tournament here in Las Vegas hosted by Fox Sports. The winner gets $300,000 for NIL, so that'll be really good if Arizona State wins. Arizona State, Big 12 foes, Colorado, Cincinnati, Big 10 foe, USC in there. Arizona State takes on Nebraska in about 30 minutes from now on Fox Sports 1. And Rhiannon, tell us about Nebraska a little bit.
So they started out 12-2 in the first 14 games of the season, and then they went 5-12 in the remaining games, and they even won against the tournament team Creighton when they were ranked 14th. So this is going to be a pretty interesting matchup. While they also sat along the bubble watch along the season to make the NCAA tournament, they could have made it. It's going to be really interesting for sure.
Yeah, and also it's kind of a matchup that's kind of with two similar teams. You know, Nebraska starting off 12-2, hot start to the season. Arizona State did something similar, 9-2 start, beat a couple of big teams in there. I know Arizona State beat St. Mary's in there, and then obviously Nebraska beating Creighton. But it's going to be two teams in similar positions. Fell off at the end of the season, didn't even make the NIT, and now they have to do this new random tournament in Las Vegas that nobody really expected to come around until it was announced.
Yeah, and Nebraska was one of those teams that, if you're a big bracketology fan, they're one of those teams that was always on the bubble, like Rhiannon said. They were always projected to 8-9 seed, and then they went on that slide. They've lost 5 straight games to end their season, including the first-round exit to Iowa in the Big Ten Conference Tournament. But they do have a bright spot with their star player, senior guard Bryce Williams. He came out in an interview and said everyone thought he was going to transfer because he has another year of eligibility. But he said, I wasn't ready to be done. He's looking to win this last game. He averages 20 points per game, 4.1 rebounds. He shoots 46% from the floor. And then you look at Arizona State, not a lot to be proud of this season. He had a great showing in non-conference play, only losing to current Final Four team Florida, and of course Gonzaga, who won in the first round and then couldn't pull off a run playing Houston. The big news going into this game is Josan Senan, who decided to transfer to St. John's about a week ago, one of the leading scorers. So now you have B.J. Freeman and Senan not playing. It's going to be rough. They also finished on a 6-game losing streak. Then they had a win, and then they had another losing streak of 5. So 1-11 in their last 12 games.
Yeah, hopefully they can use this off season to kind of recoup and rebuild, especially after those 2 transfers. It's going to be definitely intense off season for them, and I think it's just really important that they take this time, especially with all their young athletes, to build that rebuild that chemistry. Because like you guys said, they started out really well, and then it kind of just seemed like the leadership wasn't quite there, and the season kind of went from there.
Yeah, I mean, just going back once again to those first 11 non-con games, I mean, they played so many tournament teams. You had Duke to start off the year, which was rough. Then you play Gonzaga, who you only lose to by 8, beat GCU, you beat New Mexico, beat St. Mary's, and then have a rough performance against Florida, but they're number 1 seed and are currently in the Final Four of the NCAA tournament. So, I mean, it's really not that bad of an output when you see that, but then you see the run they kind of went on for the rest of the season, and it was definitely a rough watch for most of that time.
Yeah, and some news that came out today, of course, there were 2 main injuries on the team. Adam Miller, one of their leading scorers, he will play, but Jaden Quaintance will not because he's still injured. And if I'm being honest, I think Quaintance is probably going to leave after this tournament's over. The Sun Devils only have 7 scholarship players on the team, and 2 of which were not supposed to play at all this season. It'll be really interesting to see who steps up, who becomes a star. expect Trevor Best, the 17-year-old, to have a big game to kind of prove that he's the future of this team after Sanan left.
He's the best.
Yeah, and Quaintance is more than likely going to leave.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see what they do with like the portal too, and how they recruit this offseason as well, because there's definitely going to be some changes needed to be made. But
Yeah, Quaintance is definitely going to be one of the biggest if stories, like what could have happened if Arizona State had a good season, if they actually performed as well throughout the entire season as they did in those first 11. Maybe he would have stayed. I mean, he still hasn't left yet, but like in the event he leaves, like he could have put up multiple big seasons for Arizona State, gone down as one of the better Sun Devils of all time, and he still has that opportunity too. He's still definitely, I mean, he hasn't said anything about if he's leaving or not, but signs are pointing to it with just the lack of output that they've had this season.
Yeah, and there's a lot of, like Rhiannon said, there's a lot of potential in that transfer portal. If you watched March Madness, you saw Donovan Dent for New Mexico, a team that Arizona State beat. He just announced that he's entering the portal. R.J. Lewis, the wing for St. John's, a bunch of Maryland guys after their coach Kevin Willard left. So there's a lot of potential. Of course, it kind of stinks that you didn't get Koa Pete. About a week ago, he committed to U of A, and that was kind of your big target this offseason. But there's a lot of potential. There's a lot of great recruits coming from mid-major schools. You look at 3 of the 4 Final Four teams. You look at Florida, Auburn, Houston. Their main roster came from mid-major schools. A lot of them are transfers. So I think Arizona State, you kind of look at that and you kind of copycat off of that.
Yeah, and just, it's been an unfortunate season for the team. You lost B.J. Freeman earlier in the year to some unfortunate circumstances, but the rest of the team just hasn't performed as expected. And that's shown clearly as they're in this, what would you call it? Not even like a secondary tournament, a tertiary tournament.
do you guys think, what do you think they're going to do with Bobby Hurley? Do you think he's going to stay?
He's going to stay. I think they announced,
they're going to finish out his contract.
Yeah.
So that they don't have to pay him to leave, basically.
Because they would have lost about, $2 million if they'd let him go, which just financially is just not the smart move, because it's like, you're paying $2 million this season to have one less season of Bobby Hurley, whereas you can then, really take a look at the coaching market, really be like, hey, these are our options. This is who we're going to pursue. Really sit down and have good conversations with the potential future in that job and keep that $2 million.
Also, you look at this year, really all the coaches that have left their schools, you look at Patino from New Mexico, already took the Villanova job. You look at the Maryland coach, he already took a job. There's not a lot of guys that have been fired or leaving their kind of smaller schools in the market. So I think Arizona State looked at the market and they said, okay, next year we might have a better chance of getting a better coach.
Well, questions still remain with the basketball team. We'll go to a school or a sport that doesn't have any questions concerning their coaching, and that's football and their new running back transfer, Kanye Udo.
Yeah, so, with Scadaboo leaving, obviously trying to search for who's going to take up that spot or at least be able to build up that spot. We got Kanye Udo staying at 6 foot, 215 pounds, coming from Army West Point. Last year, he ended his season with 1,117 yards, 6.2 yards per carry, and 10 touchdowns, including one during the ACC championship when they defeated Tulane 35-14. I'm honestly really excited to see him step up to the plate here at ASU to see kind of how he joins in. Obviously, we've talked about Scadaboo thousands of times. He left a really great mark, and just to see I'm really interested to see just as a whole how Levitt and the offense work around not having him and how they implement Udo.
Yeah, and really spring ball, we talked about it when Scadaboo left. It's going to be more of Sam Levitt's offense, but having a running back like Udo in the backfield. Udo chose Arizona State over Missouri, who's a really good SEC school, SMU, who just made the college football playoff, North Carolina, who just hired one of the greatest coaches of all time, Bill Belichick. He chose Arizona State and told everyone that it was home. And we talked about it earlier on the show a few weeks ago about the transfer portal that Arizona State has been looking at, and I think this is the perfect addition. He started his career almost as a fullback in that weird Army offense, like the triple option. But last year he really became their number one kind of rush guy. So I think he's a really good signing. He's very similar running style to Scadaboo too.
Yeah, and he's also going to have perks of a running back that most players, if not every single player, doesn't have. Coming over from Army where, you're there to do sports, go to school, but you also have that third requirement of having to participate in the military. Like, you have to be able to keep up to that stature, keep up to that physical presence, even the mental presence is there. And now he's coming over to a school like Arizona State where you can kind of let it loose a little bit and, veg out at the pool if you want, or go to a couple, gatherings with your teammates and whatnot. But it's going to be a mental shift for Kanye Udo, and also a physical shift as well. As you mentioned, he's going to try and convert from a more so of a fullback presence to now a number one starting running back.
Yeah, and you look at the offensive line that he's going to have ahead of him and his backup running back, Kyson Brown. That's an insane duo if you've ever seen one in the Big 12. You look at the offensive line, there's 4 true seniors, 1 graduate. Of course, one of those being a transfer from Texas State that we were talking about earlier. But this Arizona State team, you lose a lot of weapons, but you also gained a lot. And I think you have a lot to be excited about, and we're seeing that in spring ball right now.
Yeah, and like you said, they're gaining a lot, which is definitely – it's just really great timing considering Scadaboo left this year. And had they not had the season that they had, who knows what type of transfers they would have been able to receive if they didn't perform the way that they did and be losing Scadaboo and their other seniors. So it's just really great that they were able to make that impact and continue to get such great recruits and work in the transfer portal.
Yeah, and you're also going to be getting guys back like Jordan Tyson, who didn't play the final couple games of the season.
I think Big 12 college football. Yeah. College football playoff.
Which the college football playoff game was probably the most noticeable absence. I mean, you had Scadaboo catching a 56-yard pass or whatever it was. But it's going to be much better for the team now that they're going to have these 2 running backs in Kyson Brown and Kanye Udo. They're going to have Jordan Tyson at wide receiver, and you're going to have a second-year Sam Levitt. And I just think that if they can perform even up to the expectations that they have, I think that...
And a new kicker.
And a new kicker, which God knows that this team needs a new kicker. So, it's going to be definitely a big switch come game 1 of the season versus NAU. So as we wrap up this first half of Onward to Victory, we'll send you into break with Uptown Girl by Billy Joel. Welcome back to Onward to Victory. My name is Colgin Hirschel. Alongside me is Rhiannon Boesl and Taylor Gautney. To start off this second half, we are going to talk about ASU Baseball and their triumphant series sweep over Utah.
Yeah, Sun Devil Baseball swept Utah in 3 games. The first was 9-5, second 7-3, and 18-6 in the third game. Everything was working. The bats were undeniable. The pitching was spot on. They only allowed 14 runs over the span of 27 innings, which if you follow this baseball team, you know that they would struggle in the bullpen. You know that they kind of let up on games that they take control of in the early innings, but they didn't do that here. Rhiannon, what did you see from those 3 games?
Yeah, it was absolute domination for sure. In that first game, New Contreras kept up his hot start to the season, going 4-6 and 4 runs, and freshman Landon Harrison also had 3 RBIs, going 2-5 at the plate. And every single Sun Devil starter also had a hit in this game. And being able to go against the Utes, and kind of just go on fire and take that first game and continue throughout the series is just absolutely incredible. And, yeah, it's just a really great series.
Can I throw a crazy stat at you guys for a second? Over their last 7 away games, Arizona State Baseball has scored a total of 80 runs.
That's crazy.
In their last 7 away games. That's averaging over 10 runs a game, which is just ridiculous. That's going back to the TCU series where they scored 38 runs in the final 2 games, which is just ridiculous. But this team has been really hot as of late. They've put up a lot of runs. The record doesn't really display that as much, only 19-9, which for the amount of runs that they've put up, you'd expect it to be higher. But the rankings do show that. As last week we mentioned that they might start to get a couple of votes, get a couple of points. They're actually ranked this week at number 24 in the D1 baseball top 25. So very good for Arizona State baseball to get into the rankings, and they saw U of A drop out of it completely. So, I personally wouldn't rank Arizona's baseball higher than Arizona State baseball, but definitely good to see that the Sun Devils are getting some good looks from the committee.
Yeah, and like Rhiannon said, it was pure domination all 3 games. In the second game, the bullpen really showed up. Wyatt Halverson and Cole Carlin had 4 and a third innings scoreless of scoreless relief, 5 strikeouts, no walks, and only 3 hits allowed for those 2 arms. Matt King also was really the star of the series. In the second game, he went 3 for 4 and had a pair of doubles. And then Jacob Tobias was also just amazing this series. And then Brody Briggs also had 2 RBIs. And then that 18-run game, I mean, they put up 18 runs. It's baseball. You don't see 18 a lot. And they became the first team to sweep Utah since Stanford did in 2022. And in that game, 12 of those runs actually came in the 8th and 9th inning, and they had 23 total hits as a team. And like I was saying about Jacob Tobias, in the third game, he had 4 hits and 4 RBIs. This entire series, he was just undeniable. And then Matt King had another 3-hit day to finish the series with a .643 average. So it's safe to say that Matt King has really been seeing the ball well. And I was talking to Luke Lendler the other day, and we were really talking about how Matt King was going to get the opportunity against Utah, and he really took advantage of it.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see the way that this team just powered through their first season of Big 12. This is their first conference sweep, and it's just really great to see how, they didn't just take the wins, they dominated. And we've kind of seen in the past the team kind of struggle to, win out the game. But, the way that they popped out this series, and then they're facing Cal State Fullerton on tomorrow, and then they'll be facing Arizona, I think the future's looking pretty bright for them.
Yeah, obviously we mentioned it a couple times. Bats leading the way. They've gotten 11-plus runs 7 times this season already. So they've definitely had the offensive output that they need to keep up with. But they got to start limiting runs. They let up 6, 3, and 5 in that Utah series. You let up 11 on Tuesday, against UNLV. You just got to pull it back in with the pitching. Not let up as many runs, and this team could seriously go very far away if they do that.
Yeah, and now they sit second in the Big 12, and the only team above them is Kansas State, and Kansas State is above them at 22 in the rankings, sitting at 19-8. Unfortunately, we don't have a series against them, so if this stands, it's going to be up and down and head-to-head. But Arizona State takes on Cal State Fullerton in a non-conference game on tomorrow, actually, before, of course, that highly anticipated weekend series against U of A.
Yeah, so look forward to that Territorial Cup matchup, one of the last ones of the major sports here at Arizona State. But last week we closed out the Arizona State hockey team season, but we've had a little bit more news this week regarding the team. 6 players have signed with professional teams. We'll go through each of those really quickly.
Oh boy, 6 players. Literally, that's insane. The way that this ASU team, they popped out during the season, and now they're just continuing to produce such great athletes. We have Luke Pavicic and Noah Beck, Ty Murchison, Ethan, I'm just going to say Ethan S., I'm not going to lie,
Ethan
Ryan
Schmaggy.
Kerwin, and Artem Schlane, being able to, dominate over ASU this year, and then being able to just sign right away. That's absolutely incredible.
Yeah, and it's really good, a really good look for the team. Of course, this team has been growing all year. If according to my research, there's only 2 former Arizona State Sun Devil hockey players that have played in the NHL, Joey Decord and Josh Doan. Decord, of course, the goalie that we talked about, who now plays for the Kraken, and then Doan, who was the hometown kid playing for the Arizona Coyotes and now Utah Hockey Club. But yeah, this is a great look for the team. You're sending 6 players to the highest level of hockey in the country. I'm not a big hockey guy, so I don't want to mess up any of these names or anything, but it's just a great look for, the athletic program, everything that's been going on, the move to the Big 12 for them, the move to the NCHC. Everything's going up for Sun Devil Athletics right now.
Yeah, so in order of when they signed, Luke Pavicic signed with the Orlando Solar Bears of the ECHL. I think it was about 2 or 3 weeks ago at this point now. Followed him was Noah Beck and Ty Murchison on the same day. Noah Beck signed a 2-way contract, same with Ty Murchison, which means they'll most likely play in the AHL, but they have the option to play in the NHL if their teams need them. Back to the Sharks of San Jose.
Shout out to the Sharks, man. Shout out Rich. I know he's happy about that one.
Connor Bedard's better than Celebrini. Anyways, Ty Murchison goes to the Philadelphia Flyers. Then a couple of days ago, it was Ethan Schmaggy to the Savannah Ghost Pirates of the ECHL. A couple of great names in that league. Ryan Kerwin to the Toronto Marlies of the AHL. I think this was 2 days ago. And then just about, what time is it now? 5:30. Just about 5 hours ago, Artem Schlane signed with the Texas Stars of the AHL. So those 6 guys, all seniors, all guys who had terrific seasons in of themselves. I mean, Ryan Kerwin was one of the top goal scorers in the entire NCAA. He rightfully deserves a pro contract, and the other guys just performed really well and all deserve to be put on this higher level.
How do you think they're going to do? Do you think they'll start, or do you think they'll kind of have to make their way up in their teams?
Yeah, so a couple of them have already played for their teams. Noah Beck played 1 game for the Barracuda of the AHL. He didn't register a point. Same with Luke Pavicic, who played 1 game for the Solar Bears. He got the win in overtime versus the Atlanta Gladiators. And then it was Ethan Schmaggy, who put up 1 game for the Ghost Pirates, going -1 and no points in that game as well. But I think all these guys should at some point get into action for the AHL teams. It'll be interesting to see if any of them will start in the NHL anytime soon.
Yeah, it's really incredible to see the way that they can just their season literally ended last week or 2 weeks ago, and they're on their just NHL, just boom. I think that's super cool and interesting. Looking at the ASU roster now, what do you think? How do you think it's going to be with these players gone? And also, are there any athletes that you think are going to get drafted after this upcoming season?
So Cullen Potter is projected to go in the 2nd round of the NHL
That's
draft.
what I was thinking.
Is on pace to be the highest drafted Sun Devil in history. Is he
going to be the youngest to be drafted in the NHL?
No. So he's 18 now. You got to be 18 to be drafted. So he'll definitely be one of the younger players drafted, as he turned 18 in January. But I think Arizona State will have a lot of work to do over this offseason to fill the gaps of these 6 players and potentially more who will be signed. We'll have to wait and see if any more will come out of that. But it's definitely great to see some Arizona States represented in the AHL, especially. There's been multiple ECHL players who've come out of Arizona State in the past, but making that next jump to the AHL is a little bit tougher. And then once we start to see them crack NHL rosters is when things will get to be really excited. People buy their jerseys, and it'll be exciting to see.
Yeah, and it's really interesting to see the 2 really big spring sports, baseball, hockey. These guys are basically drafted by these teams, but also play in college. Of course, you look at these 6 guys, and then for baseball, you look at Ben Jacobs, Brandon Compton, who are supposed to be these top 5, probably top 5th, 5-round picks. Brandon Compton probably a 2nd, Jacobs probably a 4th. But again, it's great to see these guys going to the pro level. And like you said, if these guys make the NHL, other guys make the MLB, you're going to be seeing a lot of jerseys around here, and the athletic department, the NIL evaluation is just going to keep going up.
So as more players will start to sign in the NHL, AHL, and ECHL, we'll keep an eye on that as we'll close out this episode of Onward to Victory. Thank you very much for listening. My name is Colgin Hirschel.
I'm Rhiannon Boesl.
And I'm Taylor Gautney.
Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.